Kobe Bryant's dad has this weird ass jelly bean nickname. I know not where it came from, only that it sounds interesting, and Kobe's middle name is Bean, so those ideas are probably related somehow. Oh, I also know that he dunked on Kareem once, and yeah, that's about all I've got. Anytime you've ever thought about Kobe Bryant's dad for whatever reason, I'm willing to bet that that's about all you knew, right? You knew Kobe turned out to be a top 10 player in NBA history, you knew his dad played in the NBA once, but mysteriously, you've never even seen a highlight tape of his career. Well, I'm here today to tell you that's not because he was garbage and his son didn't just magically turn out to be some basketball playing prodigy. There was a method to all of the madness. But before I start over exaggerating how good Jelly Bean really was, check out this dope clothing line I ran into. The company is called Yabwear, and they've got some super dope stuff here for NBA fans. Their NBA collection is like the cartoon version of NBA players, and they have it on shirts, hats, sweaters, and more. There's a good variety of products here already, so if you want to check it out, the link is going to be in the comment section and in the description, and consider using my promo code DOM2K to get yourself a $5 discount. It's well worth it. Let's go back in time many eons ago before you or I were even thought of. The NBA wasn't a huge deal yet, some mythical creature named Wilt was apparently dunking with people hanging on his back, and basketball in Philadelphia was actually a pretty big deal. There were a couple of city leagues going on called the Baker League and the Sonny Hill League. I'm gonna spare you the details of those, but what's important for this video is that these are the grounds in which Joe Jellybean Bryant made a name for himself. He was a tall guy that ended up being around 6'9", but he was special because of what he could do on the court. Remember, this was back around the 60s and 70s era of basketball, so if you were that big, you were expected to be in the post, to have your back to the basket, grab rebounds, block shots. You had a very specific job to stick to. But Joe was different. He could shoot the ball, pass it, dribble it like a guard, do fancy moves that even guards were struggling to do at the time, and this made him an immediate hit in those city leagues. Basketball was so much different back then because if a 6'9" player does anything like that now, you just stick him at point guard and call him Ben Simmons. But about a decade before Magic Johnson really hit the stage, people were raising their eyebrows and were in total disbelief at this kind of style. So how this worked out for Jellybean was that he basically became a city hero in Philadelphia. Everyone in the basketball scene knew who he was, they wanted to see him play, and his development was closely followed because it was clear he was going to be a special talent. That takes us to his college career at LaSalle University. This was a perfect situation for him because in city leagues his playstyle was fine, but in more professional settings, a big man doing everything he could do normally earned a quick ticket to the bench. Of course, unless you were playing under coach Paul Westhead. Westhead liked to run an up-tempo game and push the pace, so having a guy who had all the size and all the skill to go with that was perfect for his system. Joe was allowed to thrive under this, and he averaged 20 points and 11 rebounds during his 2-year college career. After that was up, he decided it was time to turn pro, and he was taken with the 14th overall pick by the Golden State Warriors. Unfortunately, the Warriors were not willing to pay him what his agent was asking for, and if they wouldn't extend him a contract offer by September, they would lose his rights and he'd become a free agent. So when it became obvious the Warriors weren't willing to pay the asking price, Joe's agent had a better idea, or at least what looked like it was a better idea at the time. As mentioned earlier, Joe was a hometown hero when it came to basketball, somewhat of a legend on that scene, so why not get him a spot on the Philadelphia 76ers? He could become a star in front of the very people that raised him. There was no way this could fail. Well, let's just say it might have been the better thing for him to play with the Warriors, just maybe. The deal was done and he did sign with the 76ers, but playing behind solidified talent such as Steve Mix, Billy Cunningham, and George McGinnis meant he wasn't about to get a whole lot of playing time to show what he could do. To make matters worse, the Sixers didn't just sign him that summer. They were a rebuilding project at the time, so they needed all the young talent they could get, which led to their additions of World B. Free and Chocolate Thunder Daryl Dawkins. These three came off the bench and they quickly became known as the Bomb Squad. They earned that nickname because when they checked into the game, they didn't give a damn about team spirit. They were just rookies trying to prove themselves and get more minutes and more money. Well, that was pretty unfortunate for a couple of reasons, the first of which being that there was a ton of pressure on Joe to perform in Philadelphia, and his 16 minutes a game, those just weren't cutting it. Remember, Philly's basketball scene literally raised him up to be a pro, and they knew what he was capable of, so when fans came to the game specifically to see him show out, they were like, whoa, what the f is this? That led to him complaining to the press about his minutes. This meanwhile, the other rookies were complaining about the same thing, and that wasn't healthy at all for team morale. The other side of that coin was that it was bad enough that he was part of the bomb squad checking in the games, but it was even worse that he was a 6'9" player taking perimeter shots and handling the basketball. Today we call that a power forward, but back then they called that a terrible teammate and an eventual bench warmer. Oh, and he tried to be fancy like he did back in the city leagues and college. To show you what the attitude toward fancy players was like back then, when Pistol Pete Maravich played for the Hawks some years earlier, his teammates and coaches were actually offended by his playstyle because it was so flashy. Now, imagine being a black basketball player back then that was also 6'9" and he was flashy. Yeah, no, the league didn't want you. So, a lack of minutes and opportunity combined with him trying to live up to fan expectations and so little playing time made for some subpar stats, and his trade value was already going down because of that. Maybe it would get better the next season, right? No, big problems for Jelly Bean. You were probably wondering at what point Dr. J was going to enter this story. Yeah, he came right after Joe's rookie season, and he'd already proven to be a professional star talent in the ABA, so he came to the Sixers with pretty much free reign over the court. Joe's 16 minutes a game had become 10, and all the problems I just described basically multiplied. The years passed, and Philly was trying to build a winning program around Dr. J, so it was out with the bomb squad, but literally no teams wanted Joe for one of three reasons. A, his playstyle pushed a lot of GMs away. B, he was involved with a police chase right after his rookie year that involved cocaine. And C, his nickname of Jelly Bean made it hard for teams to take him seriously. Oh, by the way, if you were wondering how he got that nickname,
a lot of people would say the name Jelly Bean would come from him eating jelly beans all the time. I asked him one day when I was a kid, I said, Dad, why do they call you Jelly Bean? He said,
the way I played, they said it must be jelly because jam don't shake like that, because I used to do all that little.
You know, he would imitate how he shakes on the court.
Behind the back, between the legs, shake, crossover, no-look passes.
Joe Bryant putting some moves on. He's trying to show all he can do right now. The Joe Bryant show here in the fourth quarter.
It must be jelly because jam don't shake like that. Yeah, old school.
The part of this I haven't mentioned is that Joe was the complete opposite of Kobe personality-wise. He was a very fun, loving character that wasn't all that intense. So yeah, like I said, just imagine the complete opposite of Kobe Bryant. That personality combined with his playstyle and the nickname Jelly Bean made teams question how serious he was about basketball. The only reason he wound up on the Clippers was because the guy that was coaching the Sixers, his name was Gene Shue. That's such a 1960s name. Yeah, Gene Shue ended up coaching the Clippers around this time, so he decided he believed in him enough for a trade. So everything is good, right? He gets a new start on a different team where he'll get a chance to shine. Well, that would have been a good situation, except the infamous Donald Sterling ended up gaining ownership of the franchise. He was one of those owners that didn't care about anything except money, and there's a lot of those out there even today. So one of the first things he did was slash the salaries by cutting key players. That didn't include Joe Bryant, but it included other talent on the roster. So now he ended up on a team a few years later that was only winning 17 games, and just like pretty much like today, there was absolutely nothing to be excited about in that franchise. Off to another team again, this time the Houston Rockets. If there were ever such a thing as being in the wrong place at the wrong time, Kobe Bryant's dad was literally the definition. The Rockets that year were in full tank mode so they could draft Ralph Sampson. So he went from a 17-win to a, wait for it, a 14-win team. And that brings us to the conclusion of the disappointing pro career of Joe Jelly Bean Bryant. Let's do the tallies here. He started his career on a team where he was pressured by the fans to be a star, only to be shoved into a limited role where he tried to flash his unaccepted talents. That and other factors killed his trade value, forcing him to a terrible franchise that gutted the roster for money. And then that franchise sent him to another franchise that wanted to win, but they had to take a brutal amount of losses to get there first. The underlying theme for all of this was that the playstyle he thrived on his entire life simply was not accepted, and he never got the chance to prove that it could work. So now you're probably asking, well, what about Magic Johnson? He came into the league and thrived on the same playstyle you're saying wasn't accepted, right? Well, a couple of things here. First, remember Paul Westhead? That was the first professional setting coach that accepted the way Jelly Bean played. Well, that was also the first coach that came to the Lakers just 14 games into Magic's rookie career, so he totally bought into the whole super tall, versatile, flashy player type thing. Oh yeah, and the other thing is Jelly Bean was just not fucking Magic Johnson. Nowhere in this video was I trying to convince you that Joe would have been a superstar with the right chances. He even said himself he didn't like the pressure he was under to fill those shoes in Philadelphia. However, his skill set was grossly underused because of the era he played in, which was about 5 years before Magic Johnson showed up, and he was put in a terrible situation to showcase those talents. So whereas you probably thought Joe Bryant was just some scrub and that's why you've never heard of him, you now know that he was actually the prototypical positionless player that you see in today's era. And the reason I told you this story was because I'm very fascinated by how much basketball has changed over the years. I mean, I already knew it was totally different today, but to think a player like Draymond Green would have been benched in the mid-70s and earlier is just pretty interesting to think about. I use that comparison because I imagine that even if Joe Bryant had gotten to display his worth, he would have played more of that type of role than a Magic Johnson type. Magic was just so damn good that there was no way to get upset at him for being big and versatile. Maybe if Joe had have even been drafted a year or two after Magic, teams would have been jumping at the chance to sign him because he wouldn't have had a bad rep by that point. Speaking of a bad rep, I want to add this bonus section to this video. This is a little bit off topic, only a little bit, but think back to the police chase I mentioned earlier. Remember, cocaine was pretty rampant around the time Joe was playing, and it appears he wasn't immune to that, at least for a little bit. It turns out that he was in the car with some girl and cocaine, and he just so happened to drive by the police. Long story short, he ended up in a crazy chase that resulted in him crashing his sports car, and he fled the scene on foot. I can't imagine it was that hard to find a 6'9" athlete running through a city, so of course he got caught. Joe eventually made it to court, and because he was already playing on the Sixers and because he was a city hero, everybody short of Jesus himself came to testify on his behalf, and he got off with no charges. The flip side of that was with what he had done and what was found in his car, he could have spent years and years in prison. This was before Kobe Bryant was born. If the judge would have put Joe away that day, his playing career would have been washed, and even if Kobe was born somehow, the events that resulted in him being an NBA player, I don't think they could have happened. Joe eventually went on to become a legend in European basketball, and it was there that Kobe Bryant found his love for the sport, often training with his dad and completely falling in love with the game. Just something to think about. One mistake by Joe Bryant really should have cost us one of the game's greatest legends. That's how fragile it is sometimes. And that's all I got for you guys today. If you didn't know anything about Kobe Bryant's dad, hopefully you got a little bit more background now. I've been reading a book about Kobe Bryant called Showboat, so if you want to check that out, I'll leave the link in the description where you can get it. It's a great book, and that's where I got most of this information from. If you enjoyed this, hit the like button, comment, and sub, and hit the bell next to my name if you want notifications on future videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one.